Good afternoon, everyone. The last year to 18 months has been one of cancellations and uncertainty. Sadly, I find my life is no exception. Due to a last-minute change of plans, I find myself having to pre-record this opening address. It would be an understatement to say that a lot has happened in the preceding year to 18 months. We've moved from living in a pandemic crisis to an endemic fact of life. Everyone will now need to make decisions on what their new normal life is, whether it's hybrid working, working from home, or fully back in the office. Decisions will have to be made. For life science companies, that will involve consideration of new technologies, business models, and operating geographies. Two areas in life sciences have changed significantly by the pandemic are the rapid acceptance of digital health and widespread sharing of health information. Using an app to track exposure and manage vaccinations has almost become universally accepted. A lot of sectors have had an extremely tough time during the pandemic. Life sciences has been no exception. It's been an extremely challenging time for all. The life sciences sector has, however, seen significant investment during 2020 and continue into this year. London has been the dominant cluster in the UK and Europe. 2020 saw £19.9 billion of life science related capital raised by companies headquartered in the UK, an upward trend of some 23% on 2019. The UK has seen the growth in the manufacturing sector with Vaccines Manufacturing Innovation Centre at Harwell due for completion in 2022. This has been fast-tracked, and also the Manufacturing Medicines Innovation Centre in Glasgow due for completion later this year. So investment in premises and technologies continues. Demand for laboratory space to house all these burgeoning companies and institutions remains exceptionally high. The vacancy rate for laboratories is only 4% in Oxford and even lower in Cambridge, an estimated 1%. Coupled with this growth, we are seeing more and more companies exploiting digital technologies and techniques to gain their competitive advantage. One of these consequences of these digital advances is the need for different types of premises, from wet labs and fast access to data connections and computing. The property market for laboratories continues to be red hot, especially here in Cambridge. Here in the east of England, the success stories continue unabated. The deal started off well this year in February with NeoGenomics taking over Innoviata, and then Keynote was acquired by Sanofi. GW Pharma was bought by Jazz. The deals just kept coming. I don't think there's a letter of the alphabet that doesn't have the name of a life sciences company with a success story from the eastern region. Arecor with its IPO, Apollo raising $145 million in growth capital, and Alchemab teasing $82 million from their investors in a Series A funding in April. That's just the A's. All of this illustrates that life sciences is open for business and thriving, not the least in the eastern region. Whilst all this has been going on and grabbing headlines, One Nucleus has been modifying its business model to adapt to the fact we can't all get into a large room and network and meet like we used to. The purchasing scheme continues to go from strength to strength. Proof we're still here and supporting life science business to bigger and better things. This is all down to a small but dedicated team ably led by Tony Jones. They've all gone above and beyond to bring you events, etc., albeit in different formats to meet our members' need as much as we can. I therefore want to thank this team and our non-executive board for their really hard work and successes in this. So that's enough from me. I will say my goodbyes and wish you a successful and fruitful meeting here on Helix 2021.
Thank you, John. As always, an inspiring and positive way to start the conference. Moving on now to the live program with our first session of keynote presentations. One Helix overarching theme is about new medicines in a brave new world. And today, particularly, is about the outlines of this brave new world, going beyond the specificities of our own sector. societal and environmental considerations, economic dynamics, and individual aspirations are part of the full picture, and we are delighted today to have such a great lineup of speakers who will address these questions in the context of our life science industry. Our first speaker is particularly relevant to these topics as an elected representative for this vibrant life science area that is the South Cambridgeshire. After a successful career in journalism, Anthony Browne was elected MP for South Cambridgeshire in 2019, and soon after elected as the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for the Environment. I am delighted that he accepted our invitation to join us today to share his view on the role played by our sector in the region now and moving forward. There will be time for questions at the end, so please, you can enter them in the chat box and I will pass them on to Anthony. Anthony, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Aileen, and thank you for that kind introduction. And I should also say that I'm vice chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Life Sciences and actually scientifically trained myself originally, so I do understand some of the language. It's a great honour to speak at this conference, and thank you, One Nucleus, for putting it on, a really important subject. It's also a great honour to be MP for the Life Sciences Capital of Europe, which is a phrase I keep mentioning in the House of Commons pretty much every time I speak. I recently hosted a visit here by Kwasi Kwarteng, the Business Secretary, and who had last been around the biomedical campus over 20 years ago, and he was absolutely astonished at what was happening here and said the whole world needs to know about the biomedical campus and what is developing there. We've already got the Laboratory of Molecular Biology, which I think has 12 Nobel Prize winners working in it at the moment. We've got the Cancer Research UK, Addenbrooke's Hospital, the Royal Papworth Hospital. We're going to get a children's hospital and a cancer hospital. AstraZeneca, as everyone knows, is opening its global headquarters there shortly. And then there are the outlying places like the Genome Campus, which actually does about as much decoding of the genome of the coronavirus as the rest of the world put together, an absolutely astonishing statistic. And then we have the parks such as Babraham, where One Nucleus is based, which has a lot of amazing companies, and Granta Park. And one of the absolute delights of this job being MP in this area, not just that I get to champion life sciences, but I get many companies coming to me with really exciting and interesting ideas. And it's often really awe-inspiring to be told about them, to be able to champion them on the national stage. Now, one thing we've learned from the pandemic is the importance of life sciences. It's really put life sciences absolutely centre stage, not just in the UK, but globally. The UK recently hosted the G7 meeting of leading industrial nations, and life sciences was absolutely at the top of the agenda when the world leaders met. And the UK has one of the strongest life science sectors in the world already, a revenue of about £80 billion a year, 250,000 jobs. And also, the pandemic has put life sciences absolutely centre stage. Life sciences is one of the few sectors that's actually done well in the last year, and we've had a really, really strong year. Biotech companies outperformed the FTSE All-Share by 256%, nearly fourfold. And this year, 2021, we've already had a record-breaking year for investment in life sciences, £830 million invested in the first 3 months of this year. That's almost as much as the £894 million invested in the first 6 months of last year. And one of the lessons from the pandemic is the importance of government and industry collaboration. We saw the amazing success of the vaccine program, where the UK did literally lead the world with the help, obviously, of AstraZeneca and many, many other companies. But it really showed the benefit of government and industry working hand in hand. So what is the government doing to help life sciences? Well, first of all, it is absolutely committed to promoting the UK as a science superpower. It's something the Prime Minister has said repeatedly, but in particular as a life science superpower. In the coming weeks, the government will publish its Life Sciences Strategy. I understand the Prime Minister himself will launch it, where you'll see a big increase in the government involvement and support for the sector. The government is already doing a lot. In the budget this year, in 2021, the Treasury announced plans to enable pensions to invest in venture companies, replicating the success of what we've had in the US. That might require changes to the Solvency II rules and also the pension charge cap of 0.75%. But it would make a huge difference to the sector if pension funds and life insurance companies could invest some of their money in the small startups that we see in South Cambridgeshire. It's also really important that we have international regulatory collaboration. The UK is just one market. Most of the biggest markets, obviously, outside the UK. To get access to that, you need mutual recognition between regulators. And it's something I know the government is very keen on and working on. Nadhim Zahawi, one of the government's life science ministers, has talked publicly about this. And you see, for example, there's the Atlantic Charter that's being discussed between the UK and the US to ensure greater regulatory collaboration on life sciences between the US and the UK. The one issue I've been quite involved with is the biomedical catalyst. So this is a government program to invest directly in life science companies. It's been very successful in the past. We know that for every £1 of public money that goes in, there's £5 comes out. It's one of the most successful public government investment programs. There was some doubt about the funding earlier this year. As we know, public finances are very, very tight and the government is having to make cutbacks. I pushed very publicly and in the House of Commons and outside to make sure that we had bigger investment in the biomedical catalyst. And the government, I'm really delighted to say, the government recently announced an increase of funding of £18 million that will go directly to life science companies. In the past, actually, some of the companies in South Cambridge have benefited from that, such as Mission Therapeutics, and hopefully more life science companies in South Cambridge will benefit from this new round of funding. One of the questions I get from life science companies in South Cambridge most often, the startups, is how do we get into the NHS? How can we show them the brilliant work and ideas and technologies that we have? The NHS can seem very monolithic. And I'm glad to say the government has set up its NHS Innovation Accelerator. This is explicitly set up to help smaller companies and people with new great ideas find the right people to speak to in the NHS so that pilots can be taken forward and the ideas tested out in a real world setting. I recently hosted a meeting for the chief executive of the accelerator and life science companies in South Cambridgeshire. And I'm certainly very keen to ensure that collaboration continues going forwards. Shortly, we've got Nadhim Zahawi and Lord Bethell, two life science ministers, are going to be coming to the biomedical campus and looking at the strategy that we have as well. That, as many of you will know, the Cambridge University Health Partnerships have recently published a strategy for life sciences for the sector in the biomedical campus and South Cambridgeshire more generally. And I certainly support the work of that strategy. So life sciences in South Cambridgeshire, we are the life sciences capital, as I said, of Europe. We're very strong. We've had a really strong year, but we'll be even stronger in future. And that's something that the government is determined to see happen. So I welcome this One Nucleus conference and to try and push that whole agenda. And also I look forward next year to be able to see conferences like this in reality, rather than face to face, rather than just virtually. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Really good pitch about session about the sector and how to address that. I have a rapid question for you, because as you said, it's good to hear from you what is done, and I suspect as newly elected in the region, you also would like to hear from members and from the life science companies what they want. So what exactly do you want to hear from them? I heard the challenges around funding, around access to the NHS. Are there other specifics you'd like to hear from them, and how we can encourage that?
Look, I'm absolutely a champion of life sciences, and I want to. It's one of the bits of my job I enjoy most, but also as the MP for the Life Sciences Capital of Europe, it's essential I do that. And I'm far more able to do that if I hear the challenges that you have. So when I talked about the work I did pushing the biomedical catalyst, and I spoke to ministers about it, and I took part in debates about it and made speeches about it in the House of Commons, I could only do that because companies and the Bioindustry Association came to me saying they're worried about the future funding there. So international regulatory collaborations. I mean, if you have particular concerns about that going forwards, and clearly it takes time to negotiate these things, but what would companies like to see about that? One of the questions that's been raised with me quite a bit, which I didn't mention in my speech just now, but is about the space available. I know there are companies in Bayburn Park, for example, who'd like to go to the biomedical campus, but actually there isn't space on the campus there. Hopefully that will get sorted. But also I know I understand there's demand for more shared collaboration space. So any sort of needs on that front, it would be great to hear about that. Really, whatever companies think that the government or indeed I can do to help them overcome barriers.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the space question will resonate a lot within our members, whether they are companies themselves or working in facility and building this facility. A last question before you are heading for the rest of your day. So sitting on both all-party parliament groups of life sciences and environment, are there any cross collaboration or cross objectives within two? Because obviously the environment question is brought a lot in our sector and amongst our companies. And so how can government support that cross fertilization of meeting the same objective and ideas?
Well, absolutely. As you say, there's often a crossover between the two, and actually, often the work that life science companies do have huge environmental consequences as well, and bring benefits. So just one that I recently wrote about. There's a company in Baber and Bit Bio, which I'm sure you know, that is doing work on the genetics and creating human organs. But actually, the chief executive of that company, Mark Cotter, he was co-founder of a company called Meatable in the Netherlands, which does cultured meat, and I spoke to him quite a bit about that, but also many other companies that are doing that. So this is meat made in the laboratory for human consumption, and chicken, pork, beef, and so on, all made possible by life sciences. It is coming of age. It's attracting billions of pounds of investment now. It's on sale commercially in Singapore, where it's had regulatory approval. There are companies trying to get regulatory approval for their cultured meat in the UK, but there are huge environmental benefits from that, as well as animal welfare benefits, because cultured meat has something like 70% or 80% less carbon dioxide emissions than meat that comes from animals. So that's just one example where there's a real crossover between life sciences and environment.
So we could imagine seeing more cross-funding or cross-regulatory pushing, for example?
Well, absolutely, quite possibly. I mean, if you're looking at funding, there are many different funding pots in government, obviously. So that there's and they tend to fall within different government departments. So there's the biomedical campus, for example, the Catalyst, which I mentioned, that actually comes from the Department of Health and BEIS, so the Department for Business, Enterprise and Industrial Strategy. But there's a real crossover between science and health there, and the Office of Life Sciences, which is the department, the body that looks after life sciences directly. It's actually both answers to the Department of Health and to the business department. But then they have funding pots for life sciences. But then there's the DEFRA, so the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. They have a big pot for environmental programs. In fact, there are multiple billions of pounds worth of pots for environmental improvements. And so if you have a life science idea that has environmental benefits, it's possible that you could also bid for pots from Department of Environment, not just from the health department or from the business department.
Yeah, and I think that that's an important message, is to think a bit out of the box, and also to look around at what's available, because there is support available. The key message is to find the right place to look, and for you, and I would reinforce that, is to bring the challenges that companies may face directly to you, so you can
absolutely. I mean, I would love to hear the more companies come to me and explain their science, which I find absolutely fascinating, and it's also useful for me to be able to, in the House of Commons or in doing national media or whatever, to be able to champion individual companies and their ideas and advances. But also, as I say, the barriers, any hurdles that you've got, any frustrations, do please come to me. I've yet to say no to a meeting with a company in South Cambridgeshire. I'd be delighted to hear about it, and then I can actually work with ministers, work with the government to try and help you get the success that you deserve. Clearly, we can't necessarily solve everything, but unless we know the problems, we can't resolve them. And the government, as I said, is on side. It absolutely wants to make sure that the UK is the leading life science superpower. And so, when you've got any issues, you really are kicking at an open door, and the ministers are incredibly responsive and will try and resolve anything as quickly as they can.
Thank you, Anthony. A very, very positive message. And so I hope it was heard, and we're definitely going to keep kicking at your door to raise these challenges. So thank you very much for the really kind introduction. That was really good. And to carry on this topic of sustainability, I am now delighted to invite our next keynote speaker, Penny James, to provide her insight on how to build a sustainable ecosystem for life sciences. So Penny is the Chief Operating Officer, Biopharmaceutical R&D at AstraZeneca, and importantly managing the new R&D headquarters in Cambridge. Penny is also champion for diversity, inclusion and sustainability at AZ, and so I'm really looking forward to hearing from her on how these important questions are addressed at a large pharma level and how it benefits the whole ecosystem that is ours. Same as with Anthony, there is a chat box next to the session you're watching, so if you enter your questions for Penny in this chat box, I will pass them on to her at the end of her presentation. Penny, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Aline. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And as Anthony said, I'm also honoured to be here today to talk about the importance of sustainability in life science R&D and in scaling the bioecosystem. So I've got some slides and some thoughts and observations to share from our experiences at AstraZeneca, which I hope will resonate with many of you in relation to your areas of work and business. And as Aline said, I welcome any questions at the end, time allowing. So could you bring up my slides, please? My apologies that I'm relying on slides today, but got so many facts and information I wanted to share with you. Okay, so thank you very much. So if you could move to the next slide, please. So starting with the big picture here, which I'm sure is familiar to all of you, our world faces huge sustainability challenges. And on this slide, we've called out examples that have been in the news recently, addressing the global climate crisis, better protecting our environment by reducing our reliance on fossil fuels, and overcoming the systemic inequities that impact human health. They're all urgent priorities. The WHO estimates nearly 14 million people die each year as a result of living or working in an unhealthy environment. And of course, whilst the reduced global activity caused by COVID lockdowns had a short-term positive environmental impact, without systemic changes, these reductions are indeed temporary. And across the world, many people, especially in low to middle income countries, face barriers for accessing medical treatment and healthcare for many reasons. And of course, now across the globe, we're faced by an unprecedented economic downturn alongside a public health emergency. So as we look ahead to a post-pandemic world, we've got to consider how to ensure an inclusive recovery in all markets to mitigate the threat of long-term damage to income growth, healthcare resources, and system resilience. So that all sounds very doom and gloom to start with. If you could move on to the next slide, please. However, it's not all doom and gloom, because being a socially responsible company with a strong sustainability program isn't just good for the planet. It's proven to make a company a more attractive employer. And a more attractive employer in an environment, especially in our life science industry, where the competition for talent and talented scientists, talented business people is absolutely vital. Companies that have a strong sustainability focus have proven to have higher employee morale, be more attractive to new recruits, be more likely to be recommended. And the Human Resource Management Society compared companies that had strong sustainability programs and found various fantastic statistics: morale 55% better, business processes 43% more efficient, public image 43% stronger, employee loyalty higher and better in companies that have strong sustainability programs. And then there was a millennial employee engagement study in 2016 that showed how 83% of millennials would be more loyal to a company that helps them contribute to social and environmental issues. So I think it's clear to all of us that both from a successful business ecosystem and global point of view, sustainability is increasingly important. So if you would move to the next slide, please. I just wanted to start by talking a bit about how AstraZeneca is thinking about and approaching these sustainability challenges along with many external partners. Just as a little bit of background to give you an outline of our AstraZeneca strategy: science and innovation led, focusing on leadership in three main therapy areas: oncology, cardiovascular, renal and metabolism, and respiratory and inflammation. Diversified portfolio of specialty and primary care medicines, and a global footprint with presence across all regions. So in order to be successful in our strategy, we strongly believe in our commitment to sustainability. If you would move to the next slide, please. This is about using our capabilities to make the most meaningful impact where society needs it in health. And our goal is to try and integrate sustainability into every aspect of our enterprise, going beyond meeting annual and long-term targets to evolving our mindset and our practices to meet these changing times and the challenges that we looked at a moment ago. We've got 3 key strategic sustainability priority areas. And hopefully you'll recognise these in the way that you're thinking about these in your businesses and areas. They may have different labels or names on them, but the 3 areas being access to healthcare, where we're all working towards a future where everyone has access to sustainable healthcare solutions. Environmental protection, which we're all familiar with. We've got to innovate to ensure that sustainable growth doesn't compromise the natural resources we all rely on. And then ethics and transparency underpinning everything. We want to be valued not only for our medicines, but the way that we work and the way that we support our communities. So driving access to healthcare, protecting the environment, and being a trusted partner in an ethical way are all vital to being a sustainable, successful organisation, and therefore vital to the growth of a bioecosystem. And if you move to the next slide, I think what has really struck me in my time at AstraZeneca and in the last few years that we've been working within Cambridge and very closely with Cambridge Partners is that when it comes to driving access to healthcare, there is no better ecosystem than within Cambridge and the wider Golden Triangle. Clusters foster a more collaborative way of working between international researchers, scientists, engineers, mathematicians, clinicians, connecting the wide range of expertise, knowledge, and specialist skills. Cambridge, as we know, and I think Anthony touched on a few of these stats earlier, is a hub for attracting the world-class life science talent, amongst other industries that we need, including technology, IT, and high-tech manufacturing companies. The cluster centred on the Cambridge Biomedical campus brings this together in a world-leading hub of R&D. Across the university, research institutes, hospitals, businesses in and around the city. So you can see some of the stats there on the slide. £7 billion turnover annually, 5,000 knowledge-intensive firms, 600 life science healthcare companies providing employment for, and I found this astounding, nearly 21,000 people. So if you could move to the next slide, in AstraZeneca, working within this life science cluster is extremely important to us. We've already, over the last few years, had the privilege to develop over 200 partnerships as part of being part of this ecosystem, 130 collaborations with the University of Cambridge, and then collaborations with other world-renowned institutions, including Adam Brooks, Royal Papworth Hospital, the MRC, LMB, the Cancer Research UK Institute, Wellcome Trust Sanger, and Microsoft, and other members of the technology sector. These encompass areas from disease biology to all the way through to biopharma process engineering. And I think what's really struck me personally about the importance of these partnerships is just how critical this has been in our recent times in the COVID-19 pandemic. If you move to the next slide, having trusted partnerships within the Cambridge cluster and the wider Golden Triangle cluster has enabled a really fast response to this immediate access to healthcare need. You can see there that throughout, and I'll just call a couple of the examples from an AstraZeneca point of view, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Because we had an established partnership with the University of Cambridge, we were able to partner together with Public Health England and Charles River Laboratories to set up the COVID-19 PCR testing lab at the university's Anne McLaren building in Cambridge in record time, in 6 weeks, as opposed to the months that this would have been expected to take. And then in the early days of COVID-19 testing in the UK, this partnership really quickly expanded the UK capacity. And it was also home to some key productivity and quality improvements, which have now been shared with the network of testing lighthouse labs and other labs across the UK. And of course, and I know you'll be familiar with the AstraZeneca work with the Oxford University and Oxford Biomedica to develop the COVID-19 vaccine. And again, this is a partnership we were able to quickly establish based on the connectivity of the wider life science ecosystem. So in terms of access to healthcare, I think that, that clearly underlines the importance of a really strong collaborative life science environment in being able to both plan for the future in a very methodical way to drive access to healthcare, but also to respond very quickly to the kind of situation that we have been in over the last year. And then if you move on, please, to the next slide. The second pillar of sustainability that's important to AstraZeneca is obviously environmental protection. AstraZeneca, alongside many other companies, has made some quite bold commitments. At the World Economic Forum last year in January, we announced this strategy committing to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions from our sites and our fleet by 2025 and become carbon negative across our whole value chain by 2030. So these are really bold commitments, but we know that we have to make bold commitments to be able to meet, to meet the goals and to begin to offset the effects of climate change that we're seeing. Only about 3% of our carbon footprint is within our direct control and aligned to our sites. And to achieve reduction in that area, we're looking at energy productivity, renewable energy, electric fleets, eliminating F-gas emissions at our sites. But 97% is actually in the wider value chain. And here we're going to transition in our portfolio to next generation respiratory inhalers to treat asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and explore how to design in carbon neutrality across our organisation. And that all sounds kind of quite high level and easy to say, but when it gets that, this is really about getting tactical. We're working at the moment, for example, looking at how we can design our clinical trials to be as low carbon as possible. We're encouraging our suppliers to set science-based targets in order to reduce their direct emissions through to 2030. And so one example I just wanted to share with you, which is really close to my heart in environmental protection here in Cambridge, on the next slide, is our new AstraZeneca Global R&D Centre. So I'm super proud of this. This has been a huge team effort for quite some time in building our new R&D Centre. It's the flagship of our sustainable approach. And from the start, energy efficiency and sustainability have been core to its design and functionality. We've just opened it in the last month. We just started using it for meetings and conferences. The building optimises natural light, LED lighting, solar blinds, low energy ventilation. It has ground source heat pumps, smart technology, and it's supported by a sustainable travel strategy for our employees. And we're driving the use of public transport, cycling and electric vehicles. And then something that's just wanted to touch on that's not on this slide, another thing very close to my heart, is that we have established in AstraZeneca across all our labs what we call a Green Lab programme, where we are driving sustainable practices across all of our laboratories. Now, I know that similar programmes are being run at Cambridge University. We've seen the same idea at Harvard. And we think that it's great to see this growing number of programmes across the life science industry. And if you could move to the next slide, please. Our final pillar of sustainability in AZ is ethics and transparency. And this is critical to building trust. I talked about trust earlier and how trust actually enables us to have those partnerships that enable us to respond very rapidly to challenges. You can see the 6 focus areas from an AZ point of view that we've prioritised on the right of this slide. And these align really closely with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I wanted to just focus on talent and workforce evolution, and I know this is going to be picked up in a panel discussion shortly as one example area. As an innovation-based company, and as innovation-based companies across the whole of the sector, the continual development of our workforce is imperative for attraction, retention, and to enable people to reach their full potential. And if you could move to the next slide, please. What's fantastic about the life sciences ecosystem we're all working within is how it enables us to foster this talent development and workforce evolution. There's just so much access to talent, and we've got, with sustainability lenses on, we've got a responsibility to develop our employees give opportunities for students and outreach to the wider community. We're really proud of the PhD studentship programs and postdoc sponsorships that we have together with the University of Cambridge. And it is amazing throughout the whole of the UK to see the growing opportunities for apprenticeships in life science. And the graduates and undergraduates entering our development programs consistently amaze us with their abilities. And we had 5,000 applicants earlier this year for 25 graduate places alone on our program this year. And in Cambridge, we've got many partnerships and collaborations helping to shape and deliver science activities and programs to local colleges and schools. We've got 60 business mentors making connections with entrepreneurs, guest lectures, internships, and you know, it's really important, as I'm sure it is in many companies, to be having that outreach with the community, donating volunteer time and supporting projects. So if you would move on to the next slide, I think throughout this opportunity to speak with you, obviously I've given you tons of examples from the AstraZeneca experience, but I think the key message I wanted to leave you with is that, you know, it's resoundingly clear that for all of us, being part of a thriving, sustainable life sciences ecosystem is critical to success. Through having that sustainable ecosystem in every sense of that word and concept. And I believe, you know, if you think about the actual definition of sustainability, it's making those decisions and creating those processes now that don't rob the future, don't rob the future of our planet, and don't reduce the resources and increase the resources for our future generations. So there's many ways to interpret what sustainability means. But you can see that within life science, we've got a fantastic opportunity to be successful by tackling those issues, and then we can truly have the best impact on society, our employees and patients. So thank you very much, and I think back to you, Aline.
Thank you, Penny. Really, really insightful presentation as giving the AstraZeneca example, but as you said, to bring that back into the ecosystem discussion. And I agree with you on the definition of sustainability. It's on all front, and that's this all front that we need to tackle all together to make sure that we make the most of it. If I can pick up on one of those fronts first, so on the green agenda, and that's it's discussed a lot, and as you said, in your new building, for example, and it's discussed a lot also in labs, because obviously life sciences is not necessarily an easy industry to make, you know, fully green. There's still lots of plastic use, and we're still trying to find solutions to that. But I think the big drivers for innovation, they definitely come from the larger companies, because you have the resources to do that. And so I wondered if you had anything planning to maybe share with the smaller companies. So if there's sort of like green lab good practices that could be available for smaller companies, because obviously the small ones, they're busy developing the data and raising money, and so maybe don't think about that. But if a larger player could help them with that, it would be amazing.
Yeah. No, it's a great question, Aline. And I think that, you know, there is a huge amount of information out there when it comes to Green Lab. The company that we're working with is a pretty small non-profit organization, actually based in the US. But they gave us My Green Lab, and they gave us the opportunity to actually, you know, scientists love to measure things. So they gave us the opportunity to set up kind of a competitive environment across our labs, and actually give us the opportunity to be certified. So what we've been able to do with our labs is, by partnering with them, is actually, you know, we've been surveying our labs, asking our scientists questions. We've got labs that are certified as bronze level, gold level, silver level. Green is the highest, obviously. And I think it's just a really great way to go about trying to create that engagement and the permanence that you need when you are taking an approach like that. So from an AstraZeneca point of view, we haven't as yet actually, pushed out anything externally, but we are starting to talk about it as we're seeing some success, and as we're getting more and more scientists engaged, we're starting to talk more about that externally. But I'd certainly be open to connecting anyone who would be interested with that program. As I said, it isn't really new. Cambridge University have been doing this kind of thing for years, so have Harvard. Many other areas have as well. And I think the biggest challenge is not in getting a playbook of what you should do, because that's pretty easy. You can Google what you should do in a lab to improve its sustainability. Shut your fume hoods, do more recycling, only order what you need, and don't stockpile. It's actually in getting the engagement, and that's where you really need to discuss, have those discussions with people who've been through this as to how do you get people engaged with this so that it becomes day to day as part of just the way that we do business, the way that we run our labs.
Yeah, and maybe that links with this people element, as you said, as obviously people circle in companies, and so by having been exposed to that type of behavioral challenges at AstraZeneca, if they move somewhere else, then they can implement that, and vice versa, bring that back to your company.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you can't, you'll have very disappointed graduates and new young scientists coming into your labs if you aren't providing them training and the ability to be, to be driving sustainability within the labs. It's just an expectation.
Yeah. And question relating still on the green agenda. So as you highlighted, most of your carbon footprint comes from your value chain, actually. And so maybe most of your value chain is also more in this smaller company bracket. So how do you, again, encourage them to be more sustainable, to still be part of this big zero carbon objective? How do you work with your collaborators, or contractors or others?
Yeah, I mean, it is a massive challenge, because it's not, and it will be the same for all of us. Whatever the size of the company, you've all got suppliers of some goods and services that you rely on. So for you to be credible in the sustainable goals that you want to achieve, everyone's got to be in partnership. But I think it's possibly from a commitment perspective, it's not actually as big a challenge as you think, because no one can be blind to what we need to do as in the industry and across the whole globe at the moment. Companies know, every company, large or small, knows that it cannot be sustainable as a business if it does not operate in a sustainable way. Be that now, be that trying to do everything this year, or be that by 2030 or 2035. But everyone, there is this, I think, large, broad acceptance that we are all going in this same direction. So what I think we're trying to do in AZ, and I think this would be the approach regardless of the size of company, is just looking at their suppliers and goods and services and saying, right, which ones contribute the most when we look at what they provide to us? How much, which ones do we need to prioritize? And for us, it will be really big suppliers, really big players, and they are already on this journey. And we're actually trying to learn from them. Some of our great laboratory service providers and engineering hard service providers are probably further along the journey than we are. So it's a great area for collaboration, because it's got to be a partnership and it's got to be a journey. It isn't just, here's some KPIs that we need you to achieve by X. We've got to do it together, because there may be things that we need to change about what we ask for in our goods and services to enable our partners to achieve their sustainability goals as well.
Yes, makes sense. It's cross-fertilization and making it together. So which ties back into the ecosystem question. I thought it was really, really interesting. I had a few comments in the chat box, not questions as such, but people were interested in this, interacting on how to support smaller companies onto this green agenda and overall. And so I think that would be really welcome to continue the conversation on that topic.
Would love to, yes. Thank you.
So thank you very much for this really good presentation. And we are about to take just a tiny break to get ready for the next panel that will take place at 2:10, which is about skills, talents, and people in the future of new medicine. So if you bear with us, and Penny, we would love to have you staying, of course. And if you want to ask them questions, that's the opportunity to do it. Thank you very much.
Thanks again.